Sarah had just served the most expensive meal of her life. The bill was over $3,000. The customer? Julian Sterling, a tech mogul known for his cold heart and bottomless bank account. Sarah, a single mother facing eviction and a sick child, prayed for a 10% tip, just enough to keep the lights on. Instead, she watched him sign the receipt, smirk, and leave a big, fat 0 on the tip line. She collapsed in tears, thinking her life was over. But she was wrong. She hadn't looked under the plate yet. What she found hidden beneath the porcelain wasn't just paper. It was a secret that would bring a corrupt empire crashing down and change her life forever. You think you know how this ends? You have no idea. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it hammered against the pavement, a relentless grey curtain that seemed to mirror the turmoil inside Sarah Jenkins's chest. Inside the Gilded Olive, one of the city's most pretentious high-end steakhouses, the atmosphere was warm, smelling of truffle oil and aged mahogany. But Sarah felt none of it. She stood at the service station, her hands trembling slightly as she folded a linen napkin. Her phone, hidden deep in her apron pocket, vibrated against her hip. She didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. It was either the landlord, Mr. Henderson, demanding the 2 months of back rent she owed, or it was St. Mary's Hospital, reminding her that her 6-year-old son, Leo, was due for a specialist appointment that her insurance had already rejected. Sarah, stop daydreaming and check table 4. Water glasses are half empty. Do you want to get us all fired? The voice belonged to Rick, the floor manager. Rick was a man who wore suits that were too tight and a cologne that smelled like desperation and alcohol. He hated Sarah. He hated that she couldn't work double shifts on weekends because she didn't have a babysitter. He hated that she looked tired. He hated that she was poor. "I'm on it, Rick," Sarah whispered, keeping her head down. She grabbed the silver water pitcher and moved onto the floor. The Gilded Olive was the kind of place where a salad cost more than Sarah's weekly grocery budget. The clientele consisted of politicians, old money families, and tech giants from the nearby Silicon Valley overflow. Sarah was 28, but the dark circles under her green eyes made her look older. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe bun, required by the dress code. Her feet throbbed in the cheap black non-slip shoes she had glued back together 3 times. As she topped off the water for a couple arguing about a prenup, the heavy oak front doors swung open. A gust of cold wind pierced the room, followed by a silence that swept across the dining floor like a wave. A man walked in. He was tall, perhaps 6'3", wearing a charcoal grey suit that fit him with the precision of military armour. He didn't carry an umbrella, yet he appeared perfectly dry. His hair was silver at the temples, his face sharp and angular, with eyes the colour of steel. It was Julian Sterling. Sarah's breath hitched. Everyone in the city knew Julian Sterling. He was the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a man who bought companies, stripped them for parts, and fired thousands of employees without blinking. The tabloids called him the Ice King. He was worth billions, yet rumors swirled that he was the stingiest man in Washington state. Rick, the manager, practically tripped over his own feet rushing to the host stand. "Mr. Sterling." "What an unexpected honor," Rick stammered, his face flushing red. "We didn't have a reservation on the books, but I don't need a reservation," Julian said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but devoid of warmth. He didn't even look at Rick. He scanned the room, his eyes locking onto a secluded booth in the back corner. Sarah's section. "I'll sit there." "Of course, right away. I'll have our head waiter, Antoine, take care of you personally," Rick said, bowing slightly. "No," Julian said. cutting him off. He pointed a gloved finger towards Sarah, who was freezing in place near the kitchen doors. "I want her." Rick blinked, confused. He looked at Sarah, then back to the billionaire. "Her? Sarah? Sir, she's relatively new. Antoine is much more experienced with our VIP." "Did I stutter?" Julian asked. He began walking toward the booth, leaving Rick gaping like a fish out of water. Rick rushed over to Sarah, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "Listen to me," he hissed into her ear, his breath hot and sour. "That man is worth more than this entire building. If you mess this up, if you drop a fork, if you stutter, if you breathe wrong, don't bother coming back. You understand?" "I understand," Sarah said, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. This was her chance. If she gave him perfect service, maybe, just maybe, he would leave a massive tip. She had heard stories of billionaires leaving $5,000 on a whim. That money would pay the rent. It would pay for Leo's medication. It would save them. She took a deep breath, put on her customer service mask, and walked toward the booth. Julian Sterling was already seated, reading something on a sleek, transparent tablet. He didn't look up as she approached. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said, forcing her voice to be steady. "Can I start you off with sparkling water, Pellegrino, no ice, and a slice of lemon, on the side, not in the glass. If the lemon touches the water before I squeeze it, take it back," he said, still looking at the screen. "Certainly, sir." Sarah rushed to the bar. She prepared the glass with surgical precision. Tongs for the lemon. A chilled bottle. She returned and poured it. Julian watched her this time. He watched her hands. He watched the way she placed the coaster. He took a sip, his face unreadable. "Adequate," he muttered. "I'm not hungry for dinner yet. I'm expecting a guest. But while I wait, bring me the Chateau Margaux, 1996. Sarah froze. That bottle was $2,400. The whole bottle, sir?" Julian slowly lowered his tablet and looked her in the eye. It was a terrifying gaze, analytical and cold. "Do I look like a man who orders by the glass?" "No, sir." "Right away." As Sarah walked to the wine cellar, her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. A $2,400 bottle. Even a standard 15% gratuity on that alone would be over $300. That was her electricity bill and a week of groceries. She retrieved the dusty bottle, handled it like a newborn baby, and brought it to the table. She presented the label. He nodded. She uncorked it perfectly. She poured the taste. He swirled it, sniffed it, and took a sip. He grimaced. "It's corked," he said flatly. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Sir, I just opened it. The cork was intact." "I said it's corked." Julian raised his voice, causing heads at nearby tables to turn. "It tastes like wet cardboard. Take it away. Bring me another. Sir, if I open another bottle, the manager will have to charge for the first one, unless— Are you arguing with me?" Julian slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Rick came sprinting over from across the room. "Is there a problem, Mr. Sterling?" "Your waitress is incompetent and deaf," Julian spat. "The wine is spoiled. She's refusing to replace it." Rick turned on Sarah, his eyes bulging. "Get another bottle, Sarah, now, and get this swill out of here." "But Rick," she whispered, "it's not corked. I can smell the bouquet from here. It's perfect." "Do it!" Rick snarled. Sarah took the bottle away, fighting back tears. She went to the back, retrieved a second $2,400 bottle, and returned. She went through the ritual again. Julian tasted it. He sighed. "Better. Leave it." He didn't say thank you. For the next hour it was a nightmare. His guest never showed up. Instead, Julian ordered enough food for 3 people. The Wagyu ribeye, 180. The lobster thermidor, 120. The truffle mac and cheese, $45. He took 1 bite of the steak and sent it back because it was too warm. He sent the lobster back because it looked sad. He made Sarah run back and forth to the kitchen 12 times in 20 minutes. He treated her not like a human being, but like a malfunctioning robot. He snapped his fingers to get her attention. He criticized her posture. He asked her if she had finished high school. Every insult was a dagger, but Sarah took it. She thought of Leo. Leo, who was coughing in his sleep. Leo, who needed her to be strong. Just endure it, she told herself. The bill is huge. The tip will be worth it. By the time Julian signaled for the check, the bill was astronomical. Sarah printed the receipt. Her hands were sweaty. Total, $3,240. She placed the black leather folder on the table. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Can I get you anything else? A pen, he said. She handed him her favorite pen. He didn't even look at her. He produced a black Centurion card. He swiped it. The machine buzzed, approved. He took the receipt. He hovered the pen over the tip line. Sarah held her breath. Please, just 10%. $300. Please. Julian looked up at her, a strange, twisted smirk playing on his lips. Service was memorable, he said. He wrote quickly, signed his name with a flourish, and closed the book. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and without another word walked out into the rain. Sarah waited until he was through the doors before she reached for the book. She opened it. Her heart stopped. On the line next to gratuity, he had written a single, large number. $2,000, and below it a note scrawled in jagged handwriting. Get a real job. The world tilted on its axis. The noise of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the laughter, the jazz music faded into a dull, underwater roar. Sarah stared at the receipt until the numbers blurred. 0. Get a real job. A sob ripped its way out of her throat before she could stop it. It was a raw, ugly sound. She had endured the insults. She had endured the humiliation. She had let him treat her like dirt for 2 hours, all for the hope of a lifeline, and he had cut the rope. Well, Rick appeared beside her, smelling of stale coffee and malice. He snatched the book from her hand. He looked at the total. Then he looked at the tip line. Rick let out a low whistle. Then he laughed. It was a cruel, barking laugh. Wow, Rick said, shaking his head. I knew you were bad, Sarah, but I didn't think you were 0 tip from a billionaire bad. You must have really pissed him off. I did everything he asked, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face now, ruining her makeup. He sent the wine back for no reason. He was cruel. Mr. Sterling is a perfectionist, Rick sneered, and you are a liability. Do you know what this looks like for the restaurant? Having a VIP leave 0, it's embarrassing. Rick, please. Sarah wiped her eyes. I really needed tonight. My son. I don't care about your son, Rick snapped. The cruelty in his voice was shocking, even for him. I run a business, not a charity, and frankly, looking at you right now, you're a mess. You're crying on the floor. It's pathetic. He leaned in close. Clock out. Get your things. You're done. Sarah looked up, stunned. What? You're fired, Sarah. I can't have waitresses who drive away high rollers. Get out. You can't do this, Sarah pleaded, grabbing his sleeve. Rick, please. My rent is due tomorrow. I'll be homeless. Leo is sick. Please, just give me another chance. Put me on the lunch shift. I'll scrub the toilets. Anything. Rick shook her hand off his sleeve as if she were contagious. Not my problem. If you're not out of here in 10 minutes, I'm calling security. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the busy dining room. Customers were staring. A woman at table 5 whispered behind her hand. Sarah felt like she was drowning. She couldn't breathe. She grabbed the leather check presenter, clutching it to her chest like a shield, and ran toward the kitchen. She burst through the swinging doors, past the startled line cooks, and out the back exit into the alleyway. The rain hit her instantly, soaking her uniform within seconds. She collapsed onto a stack of plastic milk crates near the dumpsters, curling into a ball. She screamed into her knees, the sound lost in the thunder rolling overhead. How could he? How could a human being with so much money be so empty of soul? He had seen her running. He had seen her trying, and he had crushed her just because he could. She sat there for 10 minutes, shivering, the cold seeping into her bones. She had to go home. She had to tell the babysitter she couldn't pay her. She had to look Leo in the eyes and tell him Mommy lost her job. She stood up, wiping her face with her wet sleeve. She needed to go back inside one last time to get her purse from her locker. But first, she had to clear the table. It was instinct. Even fired, she couldn't leave a mess for the other servers. Busboy Carlos was nice. She didn't want him to clean up Julian Sterling's disaster. Sarah walked back inside, ignoring the glares from the kitchen staff. She walked to table 4. The table was a graveyard of expensive waste. The barely touched steak, the lobster shell, the second bottle of wine, half drunk. She began stacking the plates, her movements robotic. Fork, knife, napkin. She reached for the main dinner plate, the one that had held the Wagyu beef. It was heavy, fine china. She lifted it to stack it on the tray. That's when she saw it. Sitting directly under the center of the plate, protected from the grease and spills, was a small, folded piece of thick, cream-colored stationery. It wasn't a napkin. It was high-quality paper. Sarah frowned. She looked around. Rick was yelling at the hostess at the front. No one was watching her. She picked up the paper. It was heavy, textured. On the front, handwritten in the same jagged ink as the receipt, was a single word. Sarah. Her heart skipped a beat. He knew her name. He hadn't used it once during the service. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the note. Inside, taped to the paper, was a key. It was an old-fashioned brass key, heavy and tarnished, with the number Natural 402 stamped on it. Below the key, the note continued. Sarah, I apologize for the theatrics. The wine was excellent. The steak was perfect, and you possess a patience that is rare in this world. I am not who you think I am, and the man managing this restaurant is not who he claims to be. You are fired. I made sure of that. But if you want to know why, and if you want to save your son, take this key to 1420 Pine Street, apartment 402. Go tonight. Go alone. Do not trust Rick. Do not trust the police. P.S. Look under the tablecloth. Sarah stared at the note, her mind racing. Save your son. How did he know about Leo? She had never mentioned him. Look under the tablecloth. Sarah put the note in her pocket. She looked around again. The coast was clear. She lifted the heavy white linen tablecloth at the corner where Julian had been sitting. Taped to the underside of the table was a thick envelope. She ripped it free. It was heavy. She tore the corner open just an inch. It was full of cash. Hundreds. A stack at least an inch thick. Sarah gasped, shoving the envelope under her apron. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. This wasn't a tip. This was a mission. Julian Sterling hadn't just come for dinner. He had come for her. Sarah's hands were shaking so violently that she nearly dropped the envelope. She shoved the bundle of cash deep into the front pocket of her apron, the thick paper burning against her hip like a hot coal. She couldn't stay here. Not for another second. She grabbed the tray of dirty dishes, her cover for returning to the kitchen, and marched through the swinging doors. The kitchen was a chaotic symphony of shouting cooks, sizzling pans, and clattering plates. Usually, Sarah found the rhythm comforting. Tonight, it felt like a trap. She dumped the dishes in the wash bin, ignoring the splash of grey water that hit her face. She didn't stop to sort the silverware. She didn't stop to check out with the head chef. She made a beeline for the employee locker room in the back. The locker room was empty, a narrow hallway smelling of bleach and old shoes. Sarah fumbled with the combination on her locker. 12/05/18, Leo's birthday. It took 3 tries before the metal door creaked open. She grabbed her purse, a worn faux leather bag with a broken strap. She didn't bother changing out of her uniform. She didn't want to be naked and vulnerable, not even for a minute. She just wanted to leave. She transferred the heavy envelope from her apron to her purse, burying it under a pile of unpaid bills and loose tissues. She zipped the bag shut, clutching it tight against her body. Going somewhere? Sarah spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. It wasn't Rick. It was Chloe, another server. Chloe was younger, prettier, and rumored to be sleeping with Rick to get the best shifts. She was leaning against the doorframe, chewing gum, her eyes scanning Sarah with suspicion. "I got fired," Sarah said, her voice sounding hollow to her own ears. "Rick told me to leave." Chloe popped a bubble. "Yeah, I heard. Everyone heard. You really served Julian Sterling tap water? You're insane." "It wasn't tap water," Sarah muttered, pushing past her. "Move, Chloe." Chloe stepped aside, but as Sarah passed, she grabbed Sarah's arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You look guilty, Sarah. You didn't steal any silverware on your way out, did you? Rick said he's going to check your bag." Panic flared in Sarah's chest. If Rick found the cash, thousands of dollars in cash, he would claim she stole it from the register. He would call the police. She would go to jail. Leo would go to foster care. "Let go of me," Sarah snarled, a sudden ferocity rising in her that she didn't know she possessed. She ripped her arm away. "I didn't steal anything. I'm going home to my son." She didn't wait for Chloe's response. She pushed through the back exit door, the heavy steel slamming shut behind her, cutting off the noise of the restaurant. The alley was dark and slick with rain. Sarah didn't run. Running attracted attention. She walked fast, head down, weaving through the maze of dumpsters toward the employee parking lot 3 blocks away. Her car was a 2008 Honda Civic, rusted around the wheel wells, with a heater that only worked when it wanted to. It was the only thing of value she owned. She unlocked the door, threw herself into the driver's seat, and locked it immediately. Only then did she breathe. Her hands fumbled for the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, and finally roared to life. She pulled out of the lot, checking her rearview mirror constantly. Was that black SUV following her? Was Rick calling the cops? She drove for 20 minutes, aimlessly at first, just putting distance between herself and the Gilded Olive. Finally, she pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy. The fluorescent lights of the store felt safe. She turned off the car. The rain drummed on the roof. Slowly, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out the envelope. It was thick, creamy paper, sealed with a wax stamp that had broken when she ripped it. She turned on the overhead dome light. She poured the contents onto the passenger seat. Stacks of $100 bills, crisp, new. Sarah started counting. Her fingers moved fast, a skill learned from years of handling cash tips. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. She stopped to breathe. There was more. 15,000, 20,000, $25,000. Sarah sat back, staring at the pile of green on the worn fabric of her passenger seat. $25,000. That was more than she made in a year. That was her rent, paid for 2 years. That was Leo's surgery. That was a new car. Why? Why would Julian Sterling, a man who had publicly humiliated her, leave her a fortune and a scavenger hunt? She picked up the note again. I am not who you think I am, and the man managing this restaurant is not who he claims to be. If you want to save your son, take this key to 1420 Pine Street, apartment 402. Fear her ward with gratitude. Was this a setup? Was Julian Sterling some kind of predator who enjoyed toying with poor women? But he knew about Leo. Save your son. The words echoed in her mind. If Rick was dangerous enough that a billionaire was involved, then Sarah was already in the crosshairs. She had worked at the Gilded Olive for 3 years. She had seen things, late-night deliveries, men in suits meeting Rick in the back office. She had always ignored it, keeping her head down. Had she ignored too much? She looked at the dashboard clock. 9:45 p.m. Leo was at Mrs. Gable's apartment. He would be asleep. If she went there now, she might lead danger to his doorstep. Go alone. Sarah made a decision. She shoved the money back into the envelope and stuffed it under the floor mat of the passenger seat. She put the key in her pocket. 20 Pine Street was not what Sarah expected. She had pictured a luxury penthouse or a terrifying warehouse in the docks. Instead, it was a nondescript brick apartment building in the Capitol Hill district. It was an older building, the kind with ivy crawling up the sides and a fire escape zigzagging down the front. It looked aggressively normal. Sarah parked a block away. She pulled her hood up, hiding her blonde hair, and walked toward the entrance. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the streets shimmering under the streetlights. She reached the front door. It was locked. A row of buzzers lined the wall, but there were no names, just numbers. She didn't buzz. She tried the brass key Julian had given her on the main door. It slid in smoothly. Click. The door opened. The lobby smelled of floor wax and old mail. It was empty. Sarah took the stairs, avoiding the elevator. Elevators were coffins if you were trapped. She walked up to the 4th floor, her wet sneakers squeaking softly on the linoleum. Apartment 402 was at the end of the hall. Sarah stood before the dark wood door. She held the key, her hand trembling. This was insanity. She should call the police. But Julian had explicitly said, "Do not trust the police." Julian Sterling was one of the most powerful men in the world. If he said the police were compromised, they probably were. She unlocked the door. She pushed it open and stepped into the darkness. "Hello?" she whispered. No answer. She fumbled for a light switch on the wall. The lights flickered on. Sarah gasped. From the outside, it was a normal apartment. Inside, it was a command center. The living room furniture had been pushed to the walls. In the center of the room was a massive table covered in monitors, hard drives, and maps. But it was the walls that stole her breath. They were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all connected by red string, like something out of a detective movie. Sarah walked closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. There were photos of Rick shaking hands with men Sarah didn't recognize. Rick exchanging briefcases in the alley behind the restaurant. Rick laughing with a police officer in uniform. And then she saw the photos of herself. Sarah froze. There was a photo of her waiting tables, a photo of her walking Leo to school, a photo of her grocery shopping. Julian had been watching her. For weeks. Creepy, isn't it? The voice came from the shadows of the kitchen. Sarah spun around, grabbing a heavy stapler from the desk as a weapon. "Who's there?" A figure stepped into the light. It wasn't Julian Sterling. It was a woman. She was tall, dressed in tactical black cargo pants and a tight turtleneck. She had short, cropped hair and a scar running through her left eyebrow. She held a gun, but it was pointed at the floor. "Relax, Sarah," the woman said, her voice rough. "I'm not going to hurt you. Julian sent me. I'm his head of security. Name's Elena." He's stalking me," Sarah stammered, pointing at the wall. "Why does he have pictures of my son?" Elena holstered the gun and walked over to the wall. She tapped a photo of Rick. "He doesn't just have pictures of your son, Sarah. Rick does too." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" "Look closer," Elena said. Sarah stepped forward. Next to the photos of Rick, there were documents, shipping manifests, invoices, and lists of names. "Rick isn't just a restaurant manager," Elena explained, her face grim. "The Gilded Olive is a front, a laundering operation for the Petrovich Syndicate. They move drugs, weapons, and money through that kitchen, and they use the staff to do it." Sarah shook her head. "I never saw anything." "Because you were the clean one," Elena said. "Rick keeps a few honest employees around to fool the health inspectors and the casual observers. You were the perfect cover. Single mom, desperate for money, too busy surviving to ask questions. But they were planning to change that." Elena picked up a folder from the table and tossed it to Sarah. "Open it." Sarah opened the folder. It was a termination strategy. Not for firing her. It was an insurance policy taken out in her name. A life insurance policy. For $2 million. Beneficiary, the Gilded Olive LLC. "They were going to kill me," Sarah whispered. The room spun. "Next week," Elena said calmly. "A robbery gone wrong in the alley. Rick needed a payout to cover a debt he owes the cartel. You were worth more to him dead than serving steak." Sarah fell back against the desk, clutching the folder. She felt sick. All those times Rick had yelled at her. All those times she had begged for her job. He was just waiting for the right time to slaughter her like livestock. "Julian found out about the operation 6 months ago," Elena continued. "His younger sister died of an overdose. The drugs came from a dealer who supplies out of your restaurant's basement. Julian wants to burn the whole thing down. But he couldn't get close enough. Rick is paranoid. He doesn't let anyone into the inner circle. So he used me," Sarah realized. Anger flared through her fear. "He came in tonight, humiliated me, and fired me." "Why?" "To get you out," Elena said. "He had to make a scene. He had to make sure Rick fired you publicly, so that when you disappeared, Rick wouldn't come looking for you immediately. He saved your life, Sarah. That $25,000 is for you to run." "Run?" Sarah looked up. "I can't run. My life is here. My son's doctors are here. If you stay, you die. Rick has already filed the insurance paperwork." "No," Sarah said. She stood up straighter. "I'm not running. If I run, they'll just find someone else to kill. And if they're watching Leo..." She looked at the wall again. She looked at the picture of Julian Sterling, the billionaire everyone thought was a monster. He was trying to stop them. "Where is Julian?" Sarah asked. "He's at a charity gala right now, creating an alibi," Elena said. "Why?" "Because," Sarah said, her voice trembling but her eyes hard. "Rick keeps a ledger. I've seen it. He keeps it in a floor safe in the wine cellar, the one where he keeps the vintage bottles." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "We suspected there was a physical ledger, but we couldn't prove it. The wine cellar is biometrically locked." "I know the code," Sarah said. "I saw him type it in once when he was drunk. He doesn't know I saw." Elena stared at her. "Sarah, if we can get that ledger, we can send Rick and the entire Petrovich syndicate to prison for life. But the cellar—" "I can get in," Sarah said, "but I need to go back." "It's suicide," Elena said. "No," Sarah said. She touched the pocket where the key was. "It's justice. Rick fired me. He thinks I'm gone. He thinks I'm broken. He won't be expecting me to come back tonight." Elena studied her for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "Julian said you were tough," Elena said. "He didn't say you were crazy." Elena walked to a metal cabinet and opened it. She pulled out a small earpiece and a button camera. "If you're going back in," Elena said, "you're not going alone. Julian will be on the comms. I'll be in the van outside. But Sarah, once you step back into that restaurant, there is no turning back. If Rick catches you, he won't wait for the robbery next week. He'll kill you tonight." Sarah thought of the $0 tip. She thought of Rick's laugh. She thought of the insurance policy on her life. She thought of Leo. "Wire me up," Sarah said. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, washing the city streets clean, but Sarah felt dirtier than she ever had in her life. She sat in the passenger seat of a nondescript black van, parked 2 streets away from the Gilded Olive. Elena was adjusting the collar of Sarah's uniform. She had taped a microscopic camera button onto the fabric, right over Sarah's heart. "Test the audio," Elena commanded, typing furiously on a laptop that was glowing blue in the dark cabin. Sarah tapped the tiny, flesh-colored earpiece deeply nestled in her ear canal. "Can you hear me?" "Loud and clear." A deep, baritone voice resonated in her ear. It wasn't Elena. Sarah shivered. It was Julian Sterling. The sound of his voice was so clear, so intimate, it felt like he was standing right behind her. "Mr. Sterling?" she whispered. "Call me Julian," he replied. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to the hurricane of nerves inside her. "Listen to me closely, Sarah. I am watching the thermal feeds from the traffic cameras. The main dining room is dark, but there is heat signature activity in the kitchen. 5 men. Rick is one of them." "5 men," Sarah repeated, her stomach churning. "I can't fight 5 men." "You don't have to fight them," Julian said. "You just have to be a ghost. Elena has jammed their internal security cameras. They are blind electronically, but they still have eyes. Stick to the shadows. Do not engage." "You can do this," Elena said, unlocking the van door. "Remember, we are right here. If you scream, we come in. But if we come in too early, before you get the ledger, Rick might have time to destroy it." "We need the book." Sarah nodded, swallowed the lump of fear in her throat, and stepped out into the rain. She moved quickly through the alleyway. She knew this building better than anyone. She knew that the lock on the dry storage delivery window was rusted. Rick had been too cheap to fix it for 3 years. She reached the window, located high up near the dumpsters. She climbed onto a stack of crates, her wet sneakers slipping on the plastic. With a grunt of effort, she shimmied the window open. It groaned, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence of the alley. She froze. Nothing happened. She slipped through the opening and dropped silently onto a pallet of flour sacks inside. She was in. The air smelled of yeast and dust. Sarah crept toward the door that led to the main kitchen. She cracked it open just an inch. What she saw made her blood run cold. The kitchen, usually spotless and smelling of garlic and butter, had been transformed. The stainless steel prep tables were covered in plastic sheeting. Piles of white bricks, cocaine, she realized with a jolt, were being unpacked from crates marked premium olive oil. Rick was standing near the pass-through window, holding a clipboard. He wasn't wearing his cheap suit jacket. He was in his shirt sleeves, a gun holstered openly at his hip. He looked different, harder, more dangerous. "Move it!" Rick barked at one of the men. "The shipment goes out at 2:00 a.m. If we miss the window, Petrovich will have our heads." "Sarah," Julian's voice crackled in her ear. "Heart rate is spiking. Breathe. To your left, the dish pit. Is it clear?" Sarah glanced left. The dishwashing area was dark. "Yes," she breathed. "Cross the dish pit. Stay low behind the counters. The wine cellar entrance is on the far side of the expo line, correct?" "Yes." Sarah moved. She crawled on her hands and knees across the wet rubber mats. She could hear the heavy boots of the men thudding against the floor just 10 feet away. Clang! Her knee hit a metal bucket. The sound rang out like a gunshot. "Hold!" Rick yelled. The kitchen went silent. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, pressing herself into the gap between the industrial dishwasher and the wall. She held her breath until her lungs burned. "What was that?" one of the men asked. "Probably a rat," Rick grunted. "Place is infested. I told you, don't worry about the noise. Focus on the product." Sarah exhaled slowly. "Close call," Julian whispered. "Move now, while they are distracted." She scrambled forward, keeping her head below the stainless steel counters. She reached the heavy oak door of the wine cellar. It was located in a dark alcove, slightly separated from the main kitchen chaos. She reached for the handle. "Wait," Julian commanded. "Don't touch the handle yet. Check for a sensor." Sarah looked closely. There was a small magnetic strip on the frame. "There's a sensor. If you open that, an alarm might sound in Rick's office," Julian said. "I'm hacking the alarm system now. Bypassing Zone 4. Done. You're clear." Sarah gripped the cold metal handle and pulled. The door was heavy. She slipped inside and closed it softly behind her. The silence was instant. The thick, insulated walls cut off the noise of the kitchen completely. The cellar was kept at a strict 55 degrees. It was freezing. Rows of expensive wine bottles lined the walls from floor to ceiling, looking like sleeping soldiers in the dim red safety light. "I'm in," Sarah whispered. "Good," Julian said. "Now find the ledger. You said he keeps it in a floor safe?" "Yes," Sarah said, her teeth chattering. "In the back corner, under the crate of 1945 Romani Conti. He thinks no one would ever move a $30,000 crate of wine." Sarah walked to the back corner. The heavy wooden crate was there. She braced herself and pushed. It was incredibly heavy, but the adrenaline coursing through her veins gave her strength she didn't know she had. She slid the crate aside. Beneath it, the concrete floor looked normal, but Sarah knew better. She used her fingernails to pry up a loose section of the floor covering. There it was, a grey metal safe embedded in the floor. "I found it," she said. "But it needs a code, digital keypad." "You said you saw him type it?" Julian asked. "I think so," Sarah said, staring at the glowing blue numbers. "He was drunk. He was bragging about his first kill. He said the date was his lucky number." She closed her eyes, trying to visualize that night 6 months ago. Rick, swaying, laughing, punching in the numbers. 0, 8, 1, 2. August 12th. "I'm going to try it," Sarah said. She reached out. Her finger hovered over the 0. "Sarah," Julian's voice was urgent. "Hurry! The thermal signature in the kitchen. Rick is moving toward the cellar." Panic seized her. She punched the numbers. Beep, 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 beep. Click. The light turned green. Sarah pulled the handle. The heavy door swung upward. Inside there was no cash, just a thick, black, leather-bound book. She grabbed it. "I have it," she gasped. "Get out," Julian ordered. "Now! He's at the door!" Sarah scrambled to her feet, clutching the ledger to her chest. She turned toward the exit. The door swung open. Light flooded into the dim cellar. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright kitchen lights, was Rick. He held a silenced pistol in his hand. He didn't look surprised. He looked disappointed. "Hello, Sarah," Rick said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "I had a feeling you were too stupid to stay away." Sarah froze, trapped between the rows of vintage Cabernet and the cold concrete wall. The earpiece in her ear went silent, but she knew Julian was listening. She prayed he was sending the cavalry. "You really thought you could sneak in here?" Rick asked, shaking his head. He walked slowly down the center aisle, the gun trained steadily on her chest. "I saw the delivery window was unlatched. I fixed that latch an hour ago. You left a trail a blind man could follow." "It's over, Rick," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice from cracking. She held up the black book. "I have the ledger. I know about the laundering. I know about the insurance policy." Rick stopped 10 feet away. He laughed, a low, humorless sound. "The insurance policy? Yeah. That was going to be a nice payout. A tragic mugging in the alleyway. Single mum, dead, leaves behind a poor orphan. It plays well on the news." He took a step closer. "But this, catching a disgruntled ex-employee robbing the safe, that works too. Maybe even better. Self-defense. I shoot you, I plant a knife in your hand, and I'm a hero protecting the business." "You won't get away with it," Sarah said. "People know I'm here." "Who?" Rick sneered. "Your babysitter? Please, you're a nobody, Sarah. That's why I hired you. You have no family, no husband, just a sick kid that drains your bank account. You're invisible." "She's not invisible to me." The voice came from Sarah's earpiece, but Rick couldn't hear it. "Julian." "Sarah," Julian whispered. "Elena is breaching the back door in 30 seconds. Stall him." Sarah took a deep breath. She had to buy time. "Why, Rick?" she asked. "Why destroy your life for this? You run a successful restaurant." "Successful?" Rick spat. "This place is a money pit. The rent alone is 20 grand a month. I was drowning in debt until Petrovich offered me a lifeline. And yeah, maybe I got a little greedy. But in this world, you eat or you get eaten." "Is that why you treat everyone like trash?" Sarah asked. "To make yourself feel big?" "I treat people like they deserve," Rick said. He raised the gun, aiming right between her eyes. "Give me the book, Sarah, and maybe I'll make it quick." Just then, the cellar door opened again. "Rick, everything okay?" Sarah's heart leapt. A witness. But her hope died instantly. It was Chloe. The young waitress walked in, chewing her gum, looking bored. She saw the gun. She saw Sarah cowering in the corner. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She smirked. "Well, well," Chloe said, leaning against a wine rack. "Look what the cat dragged in. I told you she was sketchy, Rick." Sarah stared at her, horrified. "Chloe, you're part of this." "Part of it?" Chloe laughed. "Honey, who do you think packs the crates? Rick is the manager, but I'm the distribution coordinator. Why do you think I get all the good shifts? It's not because of my charming personality." Sarah felt sick. The betrayal cut deeper than Rick's. Chloe was a fellow server. They had complained about customers together. They had shared lunch breaks. "She has the ledger," Rick said to Chloe. "Go get it." Chloe pushed off the rack and stalked toward Sarah. "Hand it over, Sarah. Don't make me break your fingers." "Now!" Julian shouted in her ear. Crash! A massive explosion of noise rocked the building. The sound of heavy steel doors being rammed open echoed from the kitchen. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" Rick spun around, distracted for a split second. "Get down!" Julian yelled. Sarah didn't hesitate. She threw herself to the floor, curling around the ledger. Rick turned back, his face twisted in a snarl. "You bitch!" He raised the gun to fire at Sarah on the ground. Bang! The shot was deafening in the small space, but Sarah didn't feel any pain. Rick stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. Blood bloomed on his white shirt. Standing in the doorway of the wine cellar wasn't the police. It was Julian Sterling. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was undone, his sleeves rolled up. Ideally, he should have looked out of place, a billionaire in a war zone, but he looked terrifyingly comfortable. He held a sleek, black handgun with a practiced grip. Elena was right behind him, her rifle raised, laser sight fixed on Chloe's forehead. "Drop it," Julian commanded, his voice like ice, "or the next one goes in your knee." Rick's gun clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees, gripping his bleeding shoulder. Chloe threw her hands up, spitting out her gum in shock. Julian didn't look at them. He walked straight to Sarah. He knelt on the dirty concrete floor, ruining his tailored trousers. He holstered his weapon and reached out a hand. His eyes, usually so cold, were burning with intensity. "Sarah," he said softly, "are you hurt?" Sarah looked up at him. She was shaking. She was covered in dust. She was clutching a book of evidence that could topple a crime syndicate. I got the 0 tip," she whispered, her mind reeling from the adrenaline dump. Julian actually smiled, a real smile. It transformed his face. "I think I owe you a better tip," he said. He helped her stand, but as they stood, Rick, groaning on the floor, looked up with a feral grin. "You think this is over?" Rick wheezed. "You think you won? Petrovich knows. The moment I missed the check-in, he sent the cleaners." Julian frowned. "What cleaners?" Rick laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. "You came here for the girl. But who's watching the kid?" Sarah's heart stopped. "Leo." Rick grinned. "We knew where the boy was staying. Mrs. Gable's apartment, 4B. If I don't call off the hit in 5 minutes, the apartment goes up in flames," Sarah screamed. It was a sound of pure, primal terror. She lunged at Rick, but Julian caught her, holding her back against his chest. "Elena!" Julian barked. "Get a team to the boy's location, now!" "I'm trying!" Elena yelled into her radio. "But we're 10 minutes out!" Rick checked his watch. 4 minutes left." Sarah looked at Julian, tears streaming down her face. "Please, please, save him." Julian looked at Sarah. Then he looked at Rick. "Give me your phone," Julian said to Rick. "Go to hell," Rick spat. Julian stepped forward and kicked Rick's wounded shoulder hard. Rick howled. Julian snatched the burner phone from Rick's pocket. "Unlock it," Julian demanded. "No," Rick gasped. Julian looked at the phone. It was biometric. It needed a fingerprint. He grabbed Rick's hand. Rick struggled, but Eleanor stepped on his other arm. Julian forced Rick's thumb onto the sensor. The phone unlocked. Julian scrolled frantically. "Contact. Cleaner." 1. He hit call. He put it on speaker. "Is it done?" A raspy voice answered. "Abort," Julian said, mimicking Rick's cadence perfectly. It was an uncanny impersonation. "Police are here. Abort and burn the phones." There was a silence on the line, a terrifyingly long silence. "Code?" the voice asked. Julian froze. He looked at Rick. Rick grinned, his teeth red. "I'm not telling you the code." 3 minutes, Rick whispered. The silence on the speakerphone stretched for an agonizing 3 seconds. Rick was grinning, blood staining his teeth, waiting for the sound of an explosion. "Code?" the hitman's raspy voice demanded for the 3rd time. Julian didn't look at Rick. He didn't panic. He stared at the phone in his hand, his expression shifting from desperation to the icy, calculated demeanor of a man who owned half the city. "The code is $5 million, Julian said clearly into the phone. The line went dead silent. Rick's grin faltered. "Who is this?" the hitman asked, his voice wary. "This is Julian Sterling," he replied, his voice dropping an octave, radiating authority. I am currently standing over your employer, who is bleeding out and going to prison for life. He cannot pay you. But I can. Julian paused, letting the weight of his name sink in. Check your news feed in 5 minutes. This bust is going public. If you hurt that boy, every agency in the country will hunt you. But if you walk away right now, I will transfer $5 million into any offshore account you choose. Clean. Untraceable. Rick screamed from the floor. Don't listen to him. Finish the job. It's about reputation. Julian kicked Rick's boot, silencing him. I don't care about your reputation, Julian said to the phone. I care about the boy. Make a business decision. Do you want a life sentence, or do you want to retire rich? Sarah held her breath, her hands clutching Julian's arm so hard her knuckles were white. You have 10 seconds, Julian said. Account number sent, the hitman said. I'm walking away. Click. Sarah let out a sob that racked her entire body, collapsing against Julian's chest. The tension in the room snapped. Rick let out a howl of pure, impotent rage as Eleanor zip-tied his hands behind his back. It's over, Julian whispered into Sarah's hair. He's safe. 3 days later, the rain had finally stopped. Sarah stood outside a beautiful, sun-drenched cafe near the waterfront. It wasn't the Gilded Olive. It was a place known for fair wages and kind owners. A black limousine pulled up to the curb. Julian stepped out. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He wore dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a man at peace. Sarah, he nodded. Mr. Sterling. Julian, she corrected herself. I don't know how to thank you for everything. You don't need to thank me, Julian said. You were the one who went back into the cellar. You brought down the syndicate. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a check. He handed it to her. Sarah looked at it. It wasn't 25,000. It was 1,000 dollars. I can't take this, Sarah gasped, trying to hand it back. It's not charity, Julian said, closing her fingers around the paper. It's a tip. I told you I owed you a better one. He smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes that melted the last of the Ice King. Reputation. Also, he added, I bought this building. I'm looking for a manager. Someone who knows the value of hard work and treats people with dignity. Someone who wouldn't serve a billionaire spoiled wine. Sarah laughed, tears pricking her eyes. I think I know someone. Good, Julian said, because I'd like to take the manager out to dinner. A real dinner this time, no hidden agendas. Sarah looked at the check, then at the man who had started as her nightmare and ended as her savior. I'd like that, she said. But I'm driving, and we are splitting the bill. Julian Sterling threw his head back and laughed. Deal. Sarah went from a $0 tip to $1 million future, proving that sometimes, when you think you've hit rock bottom, you're actually standing on a gold mine. Rick and Chloe are currently serving 20 to life, and Leo got his surgery, paid for by his mum's new business partner. If this story touched your heart, or if you believe in instant karma for people like Rick, smash that like button right now. It helps us share these stories with the world. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a twist. What would you do if you found a secret note under a billionaire's plate? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.